Hey, how's it going? Welcome to another MLittleProgramming tutorial. In today's video, we're going to look at the filter, map, and reduce functions in Python. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this type of content. Let's jump straight into it. So first, we'll look at the map function in Python. The map function applies the same function to each element of a sequence. After that, the map function returns a modified sequence to us. So what's the syntax? The map function takes two parameters, a function, the one we're going to apply to each item in our sequence, and the second parameter is that sequence. So, an example of where we could use the map function is if we wanted to double every item in a list. If we were not using the map function, we would have to define a function like so. The function would need to take a list as a parameter. Inside the function, we'd set up an empty list, list2. Below that, we'd need to define a for loop to times each number in the list we'd passed in by 2. And then finally, we'd return the list 2. As you can see, this is a function that is a few lines long and contains a loop that will cost processing time. Of course, this functionality could be coded easier using a map function. To do this with a map function, we could still set up a def function. The def function would have a single parameter, the single item in the sequence that we will double. From this function, we are just going to return the number that is passed in, multiplied by 2. We are then going to set up our map function. So, as we mentioned earlier, the map function has two parameters. The first one is our function. We just pass in the function itself and do not call the function here. That means that we don't need to define the argument we are going to pass into the function. The map function will take care of this for us. The second argument is a sequence that we want to apply the function to each element. So, for this example, we can just define a sequence here of the numbers 1 to 5. We can assign the result of this map function to a variable, which we'll call numbers. Now, we'll try and print the result of our map function by passing this variable into a print statement and then running the program. This is a map object. To create a list, we actually need to pass this map object into a list function. So now if we pass our map function into the list function and run the program, what we see is that our new sequence that was produced has each item that was in our initial list doubled. However, it is possible to have the same functionality without defining a def function. To do this, we will use a lambda function. A lambda function is a function that doesn't need a name. We covered lambda functions in detail in a previous video in this Python for Beginners series. I'll put a link to that video in the top right now, and I'll put a link down in the description. So, now that we are going to use lambda functions, we no longer need this def function, so we can delete it. The lambda function will replace the first parameter of our map function, as we are no longer passing in the def function that we just deleted. Our lambda function will still have one argument, like our def function. The expression of our lambda function will be our argument multiplied by 2. This code now has the same functionality as before, and so when we run this, we get the same output as before. Now let's look at the filter function in Python. The filter function returns items out of a sequence and returns that filtered list. So, what's the syntax? The filter function has two parameters. The first is a condition. This is the condition that will determine whether the item is filtered out of the list or not. If the condition evaluates to true, then the item remains in the list. This condition is defined inside of a function that we pass into the filter function. The second parameter is the list we want to filter. An example of where we could use the filter function is if we were filtering a list of ages. To implement this, we would first define a list with a few ages. Next, we are going to define a function that has a condition defined inside of it. This function will have one parameter, the item in the list we are checking if it meets the condition. We'll call it current item. We will define an if statement inside of the function that checks if the current item is less than 18. Inside this if statement, we will return true. This means that any item that is passed in that is less than 18 will end up in the filtered list. Below that, we will place an else condition, and this will obviously catch all items 18 or above in our list. Inside the else block, we will return false, so that any item that is 18 or above is not included in the filtered list. Now, just for extra information, the same can be achieved by just writing the code return current item less than 18. This is a much nicer way of writing it as well, but the way we had it first, I think, makes seeing what is going on a lot easier when we're learning how our defined functions will interact with the filter function. So now we can declare our filtered list function. The first parameter we pass in is our function. As we are just passing in the function and not calling the function, we don't need to call the function with any arguments. The filter function will pass in the argument for us when it uses this function. The second parameter is our list of ages. To output this filtered list, we need to pass in our filter function into the list function. This will convert the output from our filter function to a list. We will then put this code inside a print statement. Now when we run this, we see a list of numbers that are all less than 18 that are in the order we defined them in our original unfiltered list, just obviously with the numbers that were above 18 in between removed. Of course, we can get the same functionality as this by using a lambda function. Now that we are about to define a lambda function, we no longer need this def function, so we can delete it. We will replace the first argument we are passing into the filter function, the def function we just deleted, with a lambda function. The lambda will take one parameter, like our def function. The expression of our lambda function will be x less than 18. This is the beauty of using lambda functions, as in one expression we have achieved the same as in the def function, except here we don't have to assign the function to a name, where it doesn't really need one, as we are only using it once for a specific purpose. When we run this now, we get the same filtered list as with the def function. All the items above 18 have been removed. Now, let's get into reduce functions in Python. A reduce function applies the same operation to items of a sequence. The reduce function then uses the result of each operation as the first parameter of the next operation. This process will become clearer if it isn't already when we hop into an example in a moment. After the reduce function has got to the end of a sequence, the reduce function returns an item, not a list. So, what's the syntax? If you're using Python 3, which if you're just learning Python, it is probably a good idea to be using, then you will actually need to import the reduce function. The reduce function is in the functools module. So, to import reduce, at the top of the file, we need to write from functools import reduce. The reduce function takes two parameters. The first is a function. The second is a sequence. So let's define a def function first. Let's define a function that has two parameters and adds the two parameters together. Of course, the value of the first parameter here will be the result of the previous operation, and the value of the second parameter will be the next item in our sequence. We'll call our function add function, and our two parameters will just be called a and b. Inside of this function, we will simply return a plus b. So, back inside our reduce function, we will pass the add function into the reduce function, and then we will pass a list of three numbers in as the second parameter. In this case, we'll just have the numbers 1, 2, and 3. So now when we run this, we get the number 6. So, what has happened? Well, in the first call of the reduce function, we don't have the result of a previous equation, so we actually pass in the first two numbers of our sequence into our add function. So, the numbers 1 and 2 are added together, making 3. This 3 is then a result of a previous equation, and so on the next call of the reduce function, we pass that 3 as the first argument, and then the 3 in our sequence as the second argument. We can also get the same functionality as this by using a lambda function. This means we don't need our def function, so we can delete it. We will replace the first argument of our filter function, the def function we've just deleted, with a lambda function. This lambda function will take two arguments, like our def function. The expression inside of the lambda function will just be a plus b. When we run this now, we again get 6 as our result, and that just about wraps up this video on filter, map, reduce in Python. I'll put a link to the code you've seen in this video in the description down below. Thank you for watching the video this far. I hope you got a lot of value from it. If you'd like to see more Python programming tutorials, there will be a link in the description down below to a playlist of Python programming tutorials. With that said, if you like the video, if you could drop a like on the video, it would be much appreciated, as it really helps the channel, and subscribe to see new Python programming tutorials every week. Also, if you've got any questions about the video, drop a comment down below and I'll get back to you. Have a great day.